Good evening. Today is July 9th, 2026. It is 6 p.m. and we are calling our meeting back to order for a budget workshop. Debbie, would you like to take roll?
Here. Henry Baldridge. Here.
Here.
Mayor and Council, tonight, Matt Long will handle the majority of our presentation, but I just wanted to refresh just a little bit. Tonight we will be talking about primarily utility funds and special funds, a little bit of capital mixed in there with it. And just to provide you with a breakdown of kind of how our mill levy is split up again, city, from the total that a citizen would pay of their property taxes, the city assesses about 25% of that, county 21%. And you notice the school district is the largest part of assessments to a mill levy. If you're in the Valley Center School District, it's around 45% of the mills that you pay. If you're in the Wichita School District, it's around 35% of the total mills you pay. State equates to about 1%, and other being township and library system and county fire, it's about 17% of that. Altogether now.
Start out with talking about the street fund. Street fund is financed through primarily through transfer from the general fund, which is kind of where you're capturing some of the sales taxes transferred to this fund for smaller scale street work. You also have your county and state fuel taxes that are sent here. The projections for this year and next year for the fuel tax come directly from the state estimates that they provide. And then I'm just going to carry over that same transfer from general. We may increase that somewhere depending on how the capital budget shakes out. And also just to get control for that sales tax collection that we talked about last time. Personnel side, you had a position or portion of a couple of positions in prior years here, but they're no longer under the street fund for their pay, so we're moving that line. I will double check on that personnel line. I believe it was a staff training that went here. I don't know why that line is a personnel line. It shouldn't be kind of a shows that line system, so I'll see if that correct at some point. It should be a contractual, but it's not a personnel account or something. As far as your other expenses here, you should have handouts that show the line item detail if you'd like to look at that. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll just point out a few things that there's not really anything outside of on here. It's a lot of your administrative type costs come here, as well as on the commodity side, parts and stuff. Per request from staff, we increased the budget for parts and supplies by 20% off the budgeted amount from this year, just due to essentially the nature of inflation and other cost impacts. Bumped up the fuel a little bit as well for their request. But again, these are, I'm expecting everything to fall within, for the current year within your operating budget. I did plug in, if you look down at that bottom line, the capital outlay line, I plugged in some expenditure for this year, even though there hasn't been any, and I don't know if there will be the type of projects that usually be paid out here this year, but I put it in there just for, in case flexibility going forward through the year, potentially it could be used for, just, I don't think you would want to put any actual non-project expenditure, but you could, for instance, push that into transfer. You want to transfer this out into your capital fund for some of your larger scale street projects to pay for a portion of it. But potentially, again, it's really just a flexibility thing of the projecting there. And then again, I'm carrying forward a transfer for streets in the, a capital outlay line into streets for next year, again, for the same type of purpose. Overall, this fund is operating within its limits. Again, if I didn't plug in that 150,000, that 200,000 for this year, you'd see a pretty significant increase in cash balance. But again, we're leaving money there in case of it. So when we do start next year, we should have a higher fund balance here going forward. For operations wise, you are operating positive here, which is a good thing. Are there any questions about the street?
Yeah, so just looking at this, so the budget is for revenue is 276,000, but we're spending 304,000. So
again, I'm plugging in a capital line there that is really to carry budget, but not expenditure. That's all it's for. It's for adopting, so you have the flexibility to do that and still operate within your fund balance. So I'm not proposing you spend it. I'm saying we're giving you flexibility there. If you wanted to use it for projects, or again, you can use it for like a transfer to your other fund if you wanted to fund some of your larger scale projects there.
So I guess my question would be, why wouldn't we just reduce that so that we have basically a balanced budget, that we're not spending?
You have a balanced budget if you take into account your carryover fund balance. According by Kansas state budget law, balanced budget is carryover plus revenue minus expenditure. So you do, by the word in statute, you do have a balanced budget here. You just have it's showing a potential operating deficit. But again, for the purposes of budgeting, for adopting a budget, I plug in some additional expenditures there in that capital line item, so you have the flexibility if you wanted to use it. That's all we're doing. We're not committing to anything. We're simply adopting a budget that allows you to operate within your budget authority and expend up to a amount that we are going to propose to adopt when you accept the budget.
Now, is it normal to not have any personnel accounting for their street revenue?
If you had a larger regular revenue source here, I would say yes. But for the amount of operating expenses you have here, you really don't have much of an offset. I mean, if you were going to have a strict public works only employee that only did street stuff, that would make sense.
Right.
Yeah, in other organizations where you have multiple funds that pay for your public works department and they do a little bit of everything, it makes sense to spread that around to the different ones. But again, what you're seeing, what you're doing when you do that is you don't have enough tax revenue, for instance, that's dedicated to operations to make that contribution to public works. The only reason you're able to do it here is because you have a contribution from the general fund, which is, that's kind of the purpose of the general fund is to, collect everything and then you pay for it out of there for whatever your purposes are. It makes more sense to fund streets. If you're going to be funding streets with the general fund revenue, it makes sense to transfer it to streets rather than create a streets department within the general fund, because you need to have a street fund already because you need that fund to collect your fuel taxes. So if you're going to do that, it makes sense to do it in street fund. If you wanted to put more wages here, you could, but again, you have to increase your general fund contribution to it, whereas you're pretty much able to fund most of your public works department through what you currently have in the general fund plus what you have in your utilities, which is where most of their funding comes from, the utilities. That's most of the work they do. We move on to utility funds now, unless there's any more questions. Okay. So, Your water fund revenue is up. You had a rate increase that went into effect earlier this year, so I'm projecting an increase there for your water revenue. And then we projected I believe it was about another 3.5% going into the budget year, although that will, we may adjust that or down depending on how the next few months' performance go prior to budget adoption, whether that's accurate as possible. Personnel costs, we essentially, the methodology I've used so far for personnel is assuming nothing's committed yet for budgeting purposes. We're assuming a 5% COLA adjustment, plus merit adjustment to base pay. And then we did another percentage for the other, your other personnel costs to match what how that would impact them, with the exception of your health insurance, which based on prior year increases, we budgeted about a 20% increase. So it's between 18 to 20% depending on which department we're looking at. We have again increased basically per request from department head, increases for parts and supplies, increases for fuel, what we did with the street fund. Those seem to be the drivers of growth with every budget I've looked at so far this year, so it's not outside the ordinary. Water self-supporting for now. I'm happy with the carrying the fund balance there. Sort of rule of thumb you want for a utility fund is anywhere between 15% on the extreme low end and 25 to 35% is probably where you really want to be. You're falling into that pretty good for this fund. You have, from what I understand, you have built in an annual multiplier for rates for water, which is good. I think if you haven't already, you should definitely do that for your other utilities as well. Are there any questions here on street operations? I've played with the idea of, and again, we may discuss this when we get to actual adoption, including some more transfers to, equipment reserve, additional transfers to possibly some of your to your capital improvement fund, just for things like you're going to be having more housing, new housing start or new housing projects, developments coming online. Sometimes it's good to keep a little fund balance available for things like offsetting some of the issuance fees and things like that that come along with the permanent financing. You can offset some of those costs if you have a fund balance with them. But for now, it's 100,000 transfer to water reserve, which is good now. I don't know if in the past you've transferred your utility from this utility to any of your capital or equipment reserve fund type operations, but that is a good way to make use of surplus revenue, is to transfer that to reserves for those kind of purposes. Yeah, it's essentially using your budget authority to build cash for projects without having to spend it necessarily in the budget year.
Does that, is there any bonds or financing payments that are due from water?
Yeah, that's that $100,000 transfer.
So that all goes to
water
the
reserve.
Payment back, it goes to a payment. Yeah, so it's not building the reserves, it's used to finance, that's to make payments.
Yeah,
on,
those payments are out there. So we can even talk about increasing that amount to build fund balance there for actual reserve purposes, but that's how it's been funded in the past.
What are how much is the bond payments that we make out of water? So
I don't have it in front of me. I can get that. It'll be part of the next budget workshop. We're going to talk about bond and interest fund and all the reserve funds and everything else. We'll have that. And I would actually like to do a full we don't have to do it for budget, but at some point I would like to do just a full breakdown of your complete debt portfolio, just so you can, have a, 10,000 foot high view of it. It's a good practice just to revisit that periodically, just so you can see where you're standing. I want to say that almost all of that goes to that payment, though. Almost all of that 100,000. I'm not exact sure, but I'm pretty sure it's all of it. I think in prior years we did. I think I rounded the number up from somewhere, so there's a couple thousand probably that'll be go toward balance. I think most of that the payment.
So I have a question. You mentioned you worked in 3.5% increase in the number. You mentioned at the beginning that you figured out 3.5.
3%.
Well, he said 3.5. That's what I'm asking.
I'll verify.
Okay, because our escalation rate is 3%.
3%, yeah. So if I did bump it up a little bit above that, it would have been based on prior performance year to year. So even though your rate is only going up 3%, because it's water and usage did drive it as well, I may have just justified it with additional usage or more usage than before. So it wouldn't have been a straight rate-based projection.
Okay. Another question. You said 5% for COLA and merit, and then you said another % for personnel costs. Do you know what % you have on that?
So when I'm saying that, I'm saying non-wage personnel costs. So it's going to be things like capers, other contributions to FICA, things like that are based on wages. So that's what I would have adjusted again by 5% for those, and then with the exception of health insurance costs, which I put it, I believe for water I put it 18%, but I can double check that too. It's another thing. What time of year do you typically get that notice of health insurance premium increases? I want to say you got it before budget before the end of the budget.
Yeah, I think it's late summer.
Yeah, so
We usually get that in the fall, and then it goes into effect on March 1st.
So if we get the notice of what the increase will be, I'll reflect that in budget. Otherwise, if you're comfortable with it, I'm just going to project between 18 to 20%, depending on which fund it is and which employee. The dirty secret about health insurance now is that it's not based on prior conditions anymore. It's based solely on age. So your departments that have a higher age population are going to see the bigger increases. So, and it's fractional. We consider everybody together, but we will see different numbers for different departments. So I'll try to, if we can find it, I'll try to pull previous years' notices on that, and we can kind of do an analysis if you want to on health insurance increases. But for budgeting purposes, I'm comfortable with those numbers. But again, if we get that notice prior, I'll make it possible.
Question on the personnel. Do we have a list of what personnel in the city are covered in this fund?
We do. I can get that for you. I didn't use it for personnel, so we can get that for sure. Yeah, it's I don't have access to your personnel payroll stuff. We can get that for you for sure.
Yeah, just asking who's being paid out of that fund.
Yeah, what I'll do is something I like to do during budget every year anyway is, especially when you see that we've got different funds having the personnel costs on its own, just to make sure everything's legit.
Mm-hmm.
What I'll do is I'll do essentially an entire spreadsheet, basically taking in everybody's current wage, projecting out what the year end will be for that, then plugging in a 5% for next year, what that'll be, and then basing the percentages for FICA, percentages for papers and everything else based on that. And we can even build in. I'm not super familiar with your vacation sick leave policy, but we can even build in a portion for like liability for vacation sick for any employees that may leave employment and then have a certain amount paid out. I don't know what your policy is on taking that stuff out. But what I used to do for my last job, we had an interesting policy for vacation leave, for most of the time I worked there, you know, you could carry over up to a full 160 hours. So so the most I would have to, you know, hold liable for each employee was the max of 160 hours for each employee in addition to their normal wage every year. But sick was different. So, fortunately or unfortunately, people tend to be sick, or tend to not accumulate large numbers of sick pay over time, especially with the younger, when they've got kids who've got throughout school, so they're using sick fairly regularly. The problem we've got is we've got the older employees who are close to retirement, who've been there forever, and accrued sick leave. And they're, based on city policy, you were able to, when you left, you were able to take with you 5% of your accrued sick leave for every year you were there. So if you had 700 hours of accrued sick leave, and you've been there for more than 20 years, that's 700 hours of regular pay that you got paid out when you left. And so I don't know,
We don't pay sick leave.
that is a very antiquated way of doing sick leave. And the only reason that my former employer did it that way is because they had, at some point, I believe they had swapped that benefit for, at some point they had like a longevity type pay situation, so they swapped that for that. But yeah, it was, I'm sure, ultimately it was a cost saving thing. They didn't expect people to actually do that much over time. But last year I worked there, I had 3 employees who've been there for, you know, close to 20 years leaving. A lot of them had a lot of sick time. So that had to get built into the budget for that amount of money to get paid out in their retirement year. So
I do have another question on that. Is it common practice to switch to industry standards, which goes to paid time off, having PTO instead of having separated vacation and sick time?
I wouldn't say there's any standard for it. It really is a cost thing. If you have, I can argue for both ways of doing it. As a municipal employee, I vastly prefer having sick and vacation because
I think most employees do.
Yeah. Well, usually vacation, if you're not going to use it, it's going to get paid out. You know, within a reasonable amount, it's going to get paid out. So if I didn't take vacation, at least I have a little bit of money, anniversary, whenever they do this payout. And from an employer's perspective, though, I understand why you want that. You just provide it all together, you use it, it's gone, and you can. And you know, what we're seeing now, even in the corporate world, I don't know if cities are doing it, is the unlimited PTO. You can take as much as you need to use and use whatever you want to, but it never works. And if you're abusing it, regardless of what the policy says, they're going to find a way to use.
So are most municipalities staying with the sick leave and vacation time, or are there some that are changing over to PTO?
I definitely know there's some that changed over, but it's probably been happening over the course of the last 15, 20 years where you see that. And I know for sure several cities in the Kansas City area that I've applied for work for in years past had that kind of a policy because, you know, we go through the interview process and stuff. So I definitely saw it in that area more. So smaller communities, more rural communities, they tend to stick to the old way just because it's maybe not as up-to-date management standards or whatever, so they're not getting this kind of stuff fed to them at conferences and trainings and stuff like that. It's definitely trending in that direction.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
But I couldn't say whether, I couldn't say the majority or what percentages are. Some of the bigger states with, you know, like union representation, things like that, they're not necessarily going that way.
Right.
But,
So is that something that in the future we could do a cost compare? If we stayed with the traditional model, or if we looked at potentially, you know, modernizing to PTO?
Yeah, we could. I mean, the way you would do it is we take a look at historical use of sick and vacation. We take a look at the age of your employees, and you know we can get a couple of years worth of projections based on that fairly easily. And then we would, you know, talk about, you know, if you did it that way, what the anticipated, you know, usage would be under each, you know, your current system, your PTO type system, et cetera. So.
Thank you.
So I noticed that the association dues were $1,615 last year, and we dropped them down to $800. Is there a reason we cut that in half?
Your,
It's you.
are we still on water?
On the
Yes,
first page.
yep, on
First page.
down line 5850, 5143, association dues. Have we, I mean, I just, if our actuals were double,
I can
Last
look
year.
at it. I think it was, I think I carried forward the budget amount. I didn't, I can look into it. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think there may have been, I think it may have hit, for a specific training or something. I can't remember, but I'll take a look at it and I'll make note of adjust that back if we have.
thank you.
But thanks for pointing that out. Again, some of this stuff was carried over based on prior year budget, and I adjusted it as such, but it's a good one.
Well, technical services went from 1,200 to 400.
I think IT stuff got, some of the line items got switched around for your new IT provider, but again, I'll look at that as well.
Okay.
And again, I don't know if that may also have been a, that may also have
Special
been,
incident?
that may also have been, new service as well, so I'll look at it.
Or I know that sometimes we, like I said, find that how we are coding things and change things does affect that. That is, that was a pretty significant
Yeah.
change.
And the bonded insurance also significantly dropped.
Yeah, I'll look at that as well.
I mean, I don't mind it going down,
No, but I
but I
understand.
also want to be caught unaware and say, okay, well,
No, I understand. And what I'll do is again, I can't remember every single item I
No,
adjusted, but my thought is it was the thing where we had one-offs in the budget year, and so I'll double check it.
well, then,
Other professional services as well, the professional fee, whatever that is.
arts and supplies went from just under 19,000 to 85,000. Is that from equipment being purchased that we
It was, I think
expect to?
it was underutilized in 25. And but I still added to it, based on, requests from Thomas for budget purposes. We'll do it.
So I guess the other one I'm looking at is items for resale.
Mhm.
So we're expecting to pay a lot less for our water, but bring in more. Well, I know we're gonna bring in more, just because, I mean, we have that multiplier.
That number is based off current year, so I'll do a full forecast on
Okay, I just saw the
year to year.
25, it said the 346, and I don't know if that just has to do with water restrictions, if people are using less water, so buying less water.
I'll look at, I'll dial back into it. I base the revenues and stuff off by trends, now, so I'll go back into it. Make them look at it. I can just we'll do a brief overview of all of these budgets tonight. We do, Q2 financials. I'll have balance, all about balance financials for the June.
Okay.
That's its level. That should affect those. This is all based on essentially. I think I made numbers in here, but projections are based off of that. They gave a count. It's not a full accurate, but I made adjustments. So we'll have the data numbers for Q2. So we're much tighter on budget, particularly this year for the gas utility. And if you look at the contractuals lines, you'll see in there that the reason for that was that gas project we had, which was a big, that contractor construction line in 6860 5241. That, that was a big expenditure on the budget. So that's essentially what drove that fund balance drop from, we projected from 160 last year to 109 this year. So I would consider, and we'll look into it when we get to presenting the other capital items, but I would consider potentially journal entering those costs to your capital improvement fund or creating a project fund and journal entering those expenditures there if we want to for fund balance purposes. It's so what we do is just go to the month the transactions made and just journal entering everything from this fund to capital improvement fund, which has a 1.2 million that last fund balance. So there's more, but again, it's taken away from other. You think you'd use that for. So again, you will be able to survive in the black within budget if you leave it there, but it's up to consider. We don't have to consider.
I do have a question on that.
Sure.
With potentially looking at expansion of our natural gas system, would we not want to be protecting that monies?
Yeah. That's why I would again, you're not hitting that, hopefully we'll be closer to it next year. We must closer to it next year. But again, you're not hitting what I would call that minimum reserve balance of 15 to 25% with current year. You're not, they're going to ask about it if you, go through a bond rating again, after this year. But, again, I also would not be surprised if your revenue picked up above what I've projected as well, for the rest of the year. So in all probability, it will end up higher than that. But again, it's still, I don't think it's going to be close to what we want there, 25% minimum reserve year to year.
And I guess my same question on this one is the transfers that goes to cover debt costs mostly.
Yeah, the gas reserve transfer is the debt payments, and then again, I try to build it up a little bit, just put some money back into reserve as well. There, and then I'm just maintaining that transfer to equipment reserve. Just if there was more cash, I'd want to increase that as well.
Well, like I said, I do think it's we do definitely want to have a decent reserve fund, knowing that we could have issues. We know that what happens when we have Winter Storm Uris that happen, that we need to have some of that.
And, I would, nobody ever does it. I would say best practice for utility is I would want at least 90 days operations in your reserve funds. And that's an arbitrary number specific to your infrastructure, but it's a nice piece of cash to have for a down payment for getting preliminary work done. If you do have to go out for debt on something, you can start getting the preliminary work done. You get the engineering done ahead of time, and then repay with debt proceeds in the case of an emergency. But I would like to see that across all utility funds at all times. A reserve of at least 90 days is technically 25% of your operating budget. But again, that 25 to 35 range I think is more than reasonable to keep in a not only a fund balance but an operating or a capital reserve.
And where are we at right now?
I'll have it with the Q2.
Only at about 10%? Is that what you said?
No, it's if my estimate is correct, yes. If we take out the the big payment for the project and not count it as operating costs, and we're basically purely on next year's. At the end of next year, you should be pretty close to 25%. But we're not gonna hit it this year that way. It's closer to probably 12 to 13 or something like that.
So that's the ending fund balance, but that doesn't include what's in reserve, correct?
The reserve fund balance.
The reserve, I'm sorry, what was that?
The gas reserve. I'm being confused, sorry.
You're talking
I'm
about
talking
the
about-
ending fund balance,
Yeah.
not the gas reserve.
I would call the ending fund balance the operating reserve.
Okay.
Your reserve fund
Yes.
specific.
Okay, that's why I just wanted to clarify, because I thought
But again,
our reserve fund was a little healthier than, But I'm not sure.
I'll present everything. I'll have
Okay.
But again, I just want to reiterate, my sort of recommendation is going to be 25 to 35% for both an ending fund balance and for a reserve fund, for a utility. In that same range. So again, it's something to build towards. You're not for debt issuance purposes, for ratings and stuff like that. They want to see 25%, but I think a more healthy amount would be 25 to 35. 50% absolute minimum. And this is where I really worry is this fund, which, has had, low fund balances we talked about. We're moving in the right direction again, but also just, not putting as much as I would like to see into reserves. Not putting, we are putting some into small amount, $50,000. I'm pushing the equipment reserve, which is not nothing, and it's good to have all of your money making utility, quote unquote, your utility funds, putting something in reserves because they all use it. But again, I'd like that to be a little higher. But again, with such a low fund balance, I believe Matt spoke previously about rate adjustments for.
Yeah, our sewer rates are much like our water rates used to be. When the rates were adjusted several years ago, there was no escalation put in place. So that's one thing we need to look at this year, is building that escalation rate to cover those costs and help build those reserves in that sewer fund as well.
To reiterate Councilmember Morgan's point about no need for future system expansion, it's going to be important to get this pushed back in the right direction as well. You have need for some sort of big increase in infrastructure for treatment, et cetera. That's going to, it behooves you now to get to where you've got a healthier fund balance. So when you do at that time need to again say, hey, we're going to have to have debt certificate or whatever it is to get that expansion done, you're not in a position where you can't pay your regular bills without having to add on new stuff as well. It hurts your users for sure in the pocketbook, but I have talked to Matt in the past. I know you guys have done work with getting studies and stuff done, so we can help with that unless you're already happy with the study coming forward. But it's something we do. We have a lot of experts in utilities.
Again, noticing the numbers really different. The technical services very high in 25, and now it's quite low.
Yeah, again, I think a lot of this has to do with specific to 25 expenditures or moving of residential code to. But again, I would verify all that.
Yeah, and the parts and supplies.
Parts and supplies too. It was the same kind of thing where I think it was one-offs, but I'll verify before I submit my budget.
So then the personnel request, will that be across all utilities, like how the breakdown is of who's being
I'm going to
paid?
do it for the city. Right. It's easier for police, et cetera, their own general fund, but you have you've got employees that are in water and sewer, you have employees that are
Right.
in gas, you have employees that are admin partially and other funds, so we'll do the full breakdown of it. Stormwater utility, Again, it's not growing, I've plugged in some, capital outlay money that, we don't necessarily have to adopt and help that fund year and fund balance for this and next year. I don't have any projections for actual expenditures for capital plugged in there because, we had the ability to if we needed to. As far as operating last year, you were, obviously positive, so, I don't anticipate that changing. You can still do that. I just plug in the capital number for the purpose of giving you additional fund balance, or excuse me, budget working. And I'll look at the IT stuff here too, as well. Or technical services. You got technical services, you got printer and IT, which, again, you're not the only organization I've ever worked with that has very confusing and multiple technology line items. So it was a constant fight between me and my former AP work about it.
So does the technical services, does that where our water testing, is that where that would go?
You guys know.
I can't understand what she's saying.
With the technical services line, is that water testing?
Yes.
It is.
Okay, because I would think that we would still need something in there if we're still expected to.
I'll
I know that Dustin reported last month the issues with getting the water testing done, but
I'll verify for sure. And the last utility is solid waste recycling. Revenue's consistent, in minor year-to-year increases there just based on previous history, operating revenue increases. Pretty much carried forward personnel flat based on budget this year. And then I'll look at the technical services thing to make sure those are properly accounted for.
I'll be honest, I don't think in that realm we have much in technical services just because it's a pass-through service more than anything else. I want to
go every.
Yeah, because like I said, we did spend $3,000 last year.
Yeah, I want to go into all of those line items for last year and see how everything was coded across the entire operation.
The question I have, probably more for City Administrator Jensby, is we were buying the machinery to test the wastewater.
Mm-hmm.
So where is there allowance for that in one of these utility funds for the testing costs for that?
That came out of this year's budget.
No, I meant we do have to send in the water test, won't we have to send in
Oh, the
tests?
additional testing, yeah, we'll make sure it's built into these.
That wasn't.
Because you're adding services like that, it is worthwhile to look at all of your rate structures to account for that. I understand that we're going to push, but you already do a R&R register, or
That is on this agenda.
it's on that agenda.
Yeah.
That was my last thing, I want to make sure that was going to be addressed one way or the other.
I will say I greatly appreciate getting this these funds in this detail.
Yes.
I think this is very, very helpful. I know that in the, general scenarios that we had last meeting that you presented, we didn't have this great of detail.
You don't have, so, yeah, when we, next time we do a workshop, we're gonna cover everything.
Okay,
Cover
I just,
at the detail level.
and I would say that is what I have asked for, and I just want to say thank you, because I do appreciate it. I think it does help us understand what we're facing, what some of the trends are, what they were, what we hope to accomplish with some of those. So I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, and I'm building this out from scratch. I've also got my analyst working on this as well, and he's a little more gifted with Excel than I am, so it may look a little different, but we'll be using the same methodology for the next one. Mine are not pretty, they have all kinds of, you can't see it from this, but like when you look at it in the actual spreadsheet and stuff like that, they're not pretty. I do like pretty charts and stuff.
Yeah, I really appreciate the format tonight. Very much more informative, and I really appreciate the effort.
I want to go into this level for all the remaining, workshops, other presentations. I think you're going to have your department heads come in to talk about their individual budgets. The next meeting or meeting after, whatever that is, and so yeah, they'll have access to this exact same level of detail. I'll make sure we review and adjust everything that needs to be adjusted for accepting with that.
Appreciate that. Anyone else have any questions?
Can I say one more?
Go for it.
Okay. We need to really tighten up the sort of, plan for capital, across everything. You've got these big street projects. Last meeting, you guys talked about, last meeting I was here, you guys talked about other, future stuff that you want to talk about. And I think it's really important that we have that big conversation.
I agree.
We're going to cover a lot of it with the budget process, but sometime in Q4 this year, I'd like to do it through, nothing for you guys to do. I want to present to you basically a multi-year forecast of not only cash, but the various funds that are involved with transferring capital, line items, capital in reserves, and stuff like that. Just to get a broad picture of everything. And budget kind of sets that the operating budget for the year. It's going to kind of set the final state and where that's going to go, and then we can kind of look at that projection going into 2027. So that doesn't need to be a long meeting. It's not, to be honest, it's really not a lot of work on my part. It's really just looking at known expenditures, known cash amounts on your fund. So I have a couple of things for I have a couple of different ways I like to present those type of things, but I think what I've got planned for you guys will make sense without it being overly complicated. So. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Do you have somebody's email address that you need?
I can get, yep, absolutely.
Anybody has anything, the way I handle dealing with governing bodies is, if you guys have any requests, I respond to everybody with whatever information you're asking. So if you have anything, either go through that or come to me. So, however you guys want to do it.
Anything else? Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the workshop.
When we adjourn?
Motion by Council President Hedstrom, second by Council Member Baldridge. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned from our workshop.